All right, so in today's video, we're going to talk about a very difficult lighting situation and what type of metering system really works the best. Why does the I-2 camera always overexpose by 2/3 of a stop? And see if we can find a solution to that. And as well as talking about maybe we're all just making this metering systems with the Polaroid cameras way too hard. I'd like to thank my beautiful wife, Eve and Model. Happy Valentine's Day. And just what she wanted to be doing. And we're going to take a look at first different ways that you can meter for the Polaroid camera. The camera has a built-in reflective meter. I also have a reflective meter by Voigtlander here put on the top. I've got my spot meter and I've got an incident meter in my pocket. Right off the bat, the spot meter. I've read a lot of articles where people are talking about trying to do zone system with Polaroid. I think that's a mistake. I think this is just complicating what is a very simple system. Yes, I could 100% figure out what the exposure latitude of Polaroid film is, probably 4 to 6 stops. And I could sit around and meter the highlights and meter the shadows. But at the end of the day, what's the point? I mean, this is not negative material where you have precise control over development, pushing and pulling. It's a much simpler process. And I think keeping the process simpler and focusing on your subject is more important when working with this type of camera. So the spot meter for me is out. If I take a look at the meter on top of the camera, one of the big things that I think is causing potential overexposure issues with people with the Polaroid camera is the angle of view of what the meter is seeing. Almost all Polaroid cameras, in my experience, are very sensitive to very bright areas of light. And because your exposure latitude is so small, it's very easy to overexpose an image and have it look washed out, or to have the image look too dark. And to find that Goldilocks area in the middle is kind of tough. So if I'm going to use the Voigtlander metering system, I kind of want to aim it at Eve, but I don't want to get too much of that window in the frame. My gut instinct on a shot like this would always tell me to overexpose the image by about a stop because she's really brightly side lit, knowing that the meter is going to screw it up, or to bring an auxiliary fill flash in or something like that. But for right now, we're just going to look at the meters. And if I take a metering here of Eve, it says it's f8 at a 1/25th of a second. So what I'm going to do is turn the camera on. I'm going to go to manual exposure, and I'm going to put it at f8 at a 1/25th of a second. I'm going to verify that one more time. It looks good. Exposure compensation and everything is turned off. So I'm going to look through the camera. Take the first shot. So that was using the auxiliary meter. So now next, I've got the camera set to auto mode. It's f8 at a 30th of a second. So let's take that shot. Now, once again, my suspicion is the camera is going to have overexposed that image by 2/3 of a stop. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to underexpose the next frame by 2/3 and take it again. And what we're going to do is we're going to look to see how the first metering through the Voigtlander worked, how the auto worked, how the minus 2/3 worked. And the way that I, generally speaking, like to use a camera like this is with an incident light meter reading. Reflective light meter readings with Polaroid material, because the latitude is so low, is just difficult. An incident light meter reading is going to read the light falling on her. And it also allows me to, create her as the hero in terms of the exposure. She's what I care about that's metered properly. So I've got the meter set to incident mode, turning it on, come in front of her right here. So that's that exposure. So when Polaroid first introduced the SX70 camera, it has a very simple lighten and darken control. And I think there's something really lovely about that. Because of the quirks of Polaroid material, it can change a little bit from batch to batch. There is inconsistency in the material. Because of the narrow exposure latitude, sometimes I think just sort of looking at the scene and through knowledge of shooting, instinctively knowing how much you need to lighten or darken is really the better approach. Because she's so brightly lit on the side, I know that I'm going to need to do a 2-line increase in order to get that exposure perfect with this camera. Every camera, every meter is going to be a little bit different as well. So you have to dial this in for your own working style. So let's see how that looks. Now, I don't know what the shutter speed was on that. I don't know what the f-stop on that was, but I don't really care. I'm more looking at the subject and looking at the light and just using my own instinct and my own knowledge to determine really the best exposure, as opposed to perhaps going down the rabbit hole of trying to control the material that has a lot of variability. Let's wait about 30 minutes and we'll take a look at the Polaroids. So let's take a look at the results. First, here is the one with the Voigtlander meter. As you can see, it's not bad. It's maybe a whisker dark, but there's great detail in the shadows. Highlights are as controlled as you'd want. Overall, I'd say that's very successful. The second image, this was the I-2 using the I-2 in auto mode. As always, it is way too bright. It's way too overexposed, as all of us have been seeing with the I-2 camera. The next one is the I-2 camera at -2/3. And as you can see, it's significantly better than the previous one. It's maybe still a little bright, by another third or maybe a little bit more, but it's so much better than the previous one. It's shocking. The next one is with the incident light meter. This was using the Sekonic incident light meter reading, and it looks like this. It's really nice. So far, it's the best out of the bunch. It's better than the Voigtlander, it's better than the in-camera, it's better than the -2/3. As I said, incident light meter reading is hard to say no to. But now, for the final one, this is the one where I was on the Mint camera and I was using an instinctive way of working, and it is by far the best of the best. So getting to know your camera and getting to know the materials really is the best way, in my opinion, when working with these type of cameras. All right, so in conclusion, what can we quantify from these tests? Well, first off, Polaroid has a lot of variability in their production. There's a lot of variability from pack to pack, and you need to be aware of that and be willing to shoot a shot or two from time to time on a new run just to verify that the results and everything are still going to be the same for your working style. Secondly, that the Polaroid I-2 camera absolutely does overexpose by 2/3 of a stop consistently. The only time I've ever seen it expose reasonably well at a totally neutral setting was indoors in very flat lighting. That seemed okay. But in almost every other scenario, if I'm using the auto mode, I would go -2/3 to shoot. And in some cases, like in the example we did today, I would probably even go a whole stop down. That would have been even better. On cameras like modified SX70s, this one by Mint, this one by Dennis at Chromatic Parts, both of those cameras have had the board and everything. They have a brand new PCB board in it, the meter's new, all that stuff. So they should be better in tune with modern Polaroid film. But even then, it's not perfect once again because Polaroid film has variability. And if you're an older Polaroid shooter like me, you remember when doing a one-line adjustment was pretty big. On the new film, what I'm finding is that it's really a line plus to really move the film meaningful in any direction. And 2 lines to 2 lines plus for something significant like a hard backlight or a really difficult side light to compensate for. So just know on these cameras with the new material, I'd be a little more aggressive on the adjustment for under and overexposure. Same thing is true on the Mint, by the way. 1/3 of a stop increment is very small amount on this camera. I would do a larger adjustment. I also feel that if you're gonna use a camera like the I-2 and you own an incident light meter, no matter which one it is, I think that's gonna give you consistently the best exposures with a camera like the I-2. It just makes total sense. Now, on cameras like the Mint modified cameras, a lot of you know they come with these attachments. They give you a full range of shutter speeds that you can use on the top. I only use this attachment on the camera like this under very, very limited and specific purposes. Otherwise, it sits in my bag 90% of the time, and I just do the Jedi method, get to know your materials, use the force, figure out what the film and the camera can do. Spending the time with your camera and spending the time with the film is really the best way to learn how to get proper exposure. I can't emphasize that enough. Years ago, I posted videos on the Handy Andy exposure calculator, and in that video, I talked about getting to see light and understanding light and not trusting the meters and cameras. This is one of the big reasons why. You have a gut instinct as to what that exposure latitude is on that Polaroid material. Dial it in, be sensitive to it. It's really the best way. On cameras like Dennis, where it has bichromatic parts, where it has the Bluetooth capability and I can use an app to control the exposure. Once again, I only use that from time to time, and it's for long exposures or just stuff that's really difficult and I'm not sure I'm gonna be able to get enough compensation and proper control from the dial onto the front of the camera. But those are really, really rare. And if you invest the time now in learning the subtleties of your camera and the variability of the material, you will just be that much of a better photographer. Thank you very much for listening. I can't wait to hear your thoughts. Now go shoot some film.